Welcome to this session focusing on child development in the early years. The focus is on the development between the ages of 0 and 5, but given the importance of early child development, hopefully this session will provide a useful foundation for all staff working with primary age children. During this session, we will cover what's meant by the term child development, the importance of early childhood development, how children develop in the three prime areas of physical development, personal, social and emotional development, and communication and language, and what you can roughly expect by the age of 5 in those areas. So what do we mean by child development? According to Birth to 5 Matters, development is a continuous process which is influenced by many factors. Development refers to the processes through which the brain, body, abilities and behaviour of the infant, child and adult become more complex and continue to mature throughout life. Development involves cognition, memory, attention, language and communication, as well as feelings, relationships and sensory motor skills. Although we often look at timelines and stages of development, young children's development does not follow a predictable step-by-step sequence, and all children are different in their pathway and speed at which they develop. This is why it's normal to have such huge variation in what is considered normal in terms of reaching developmental milestones. There are some aspects of development which enable you to describe the child's progress in terms of whether it's typical for their age, for example, learning to talk, where by the age of 2, health visitors be looking for children to be able to start to put 2 or more words together. However, it's important to consider overall development within these aspects and not rely on matching every element in a list of statements to judge a child's progress. It's important to take a holistic view to see whether a child is roughly on the right track or developing a bit more slowly or more quickly in particular areas. And how do children develop? Development isn't something that proceeds in a straight line. Also, the different domains of communication, physical skills, and emotional well-being are all intertwined and developed together. For example, the development of fine motor skills relies on posture and motor control, sensory integration of knowing where you are within space and understanding your strength, as well as the cognitive ability to pay attention and coordinate those movements. Evangelou summarises this nicely, where she says that development proceeds in a web of multiple strands, with different children following different pathways. And Birth to 5 Matters says that child development should be seen more as dancing around a ballroom than climbing a ladder. This diagram looks intimidating initially, but I think it's a really nice illustration of the complexity within child development. How can it be a simple step-by-step process that's the same for all children when it relies on the coming together of so many different factors? Child development is not just the product of a child's brain being ready for a new step, as developmental charts or milestones might suggest, but it's also shaped positively and negatively by factors individual to that child, environmental factors around the child, parent-child interactions, and parenting behaviour. You can see on this diagram all of those factors at the top, including the child's temperament, their genetics, their health, which all make a huge difference, as well as the attachments formed between the child and parent, and the economic conditions that they are raised in, which we know from the research into the attainment gap can have a big impact even from an early age. There are bidirectional arrows between all of these factors, as they can all influence each other. For example, the perinatal and antenatal experience of a parent can then impact on the interactions between the child and their parent. In the middle of the diagram, you have some of the skills that emerge following these early experiences, again with arrows between them illustrating how they're intertwined in that web of development, finally resulting in the social, communication, cognitive and emotional skills that you will start to assess when children start school. Hopefully this shows why it's normal to have so much variation in some of the skills within children of roughly the same age. The Birth to 5 Matters guidance illustrates this in a much prettier way with this diagram of the most important factors influencing development. They emphasise the importance of early relationships and interactions for our emotional well-being, self-regulation and language skills, and the impact of our physical health, including nutrition, sleep, and opportunities for play and movement. They highlight the importance of opportunities to experience the world and practice at their developing skills, as well as the benefits of building connections between home and school settings to share knowledge and celebrate diversity. And according to the research into early child development, there are 4 things that children need in their early years to support that process of development in the best possible way. Those are having a nurturing, responsive caregiver, exposure to rich language, play that promotes learning, and good nutrition. Research from Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child suggests that babies' brains form new connections at an astonishing rate, more than 1 million every single second, and it's a pace that is never repeated again throughout the lifespan. In the brain building process, neural connections are shaped by the individual factors that we heard about previously, and also life experiences, in particular, good nutrition, protection, stimulation from talk, play, and a responsive attention from caregivers. This combination of nature and nurture establishes the foundations of a child's future. These statistics show why the early child period is considered to be the most important developmental phase throughout the lifespan. Healthy early child development, which includes the physical, social, emotional, and language and cognitive domains of development, strongly influences well-being, obesity, mental health, heart disease, competence in literacy and numeracy, criminality, and economic participation throughout life. Because of the huge number of factors that can impact on child development and the experiences that children have of those 4 crucial components described before, there's already a large attainment gap between the most and least advantaged children when they start school, particularly in their vocabulary, which we know has an important role in the development of other skills, including self-regulation and literacy. The Education Endowment Foundation suggested that there's a 17-month gap between the vocabulary of the most and least disadvantaged children at the point at which they start school. In this session, we will be focusing upon the development of the 3 prime areas: personal, social and emotional development, communication and language, and physical development, which are the universal core aspects of early child development. These skills are time sensitive because of the biological factors that enable rapid brain connections, particularly in those first 3 years of life, but continuing throughout early childhood. Developmental steps missed at this early crucial stage are much harder to address later on, so it's crucial that children's interactions and experiences in the first few years support development in these fundamental areas. All 3 prime areas are always in action for a young child. In every activity, the child is experiencing feelings and developing a sense of self and others, is physically engaged through their senses and movement, and is learning to understand and communicate with others. It's through these aspects that the child accesses the world around them and relationships with other people, which in turn opens the doors to learning in all areas. The prime areas therefore strongly influence learning in the specific areas of learning and development. Whilst these are a focus in early years provisions, they remain crucial throughout all of the EYFS and beyond to build a solid foundation upon which to learn. We're going to start by focusing on personal, social and emotional development. Who we are, how we get along with others and how we feel are foundations that form the bedrock of our lives, and development of these skills is fundamental to all other aspects of lifelong development and learning, and is key to children's well-being and resilience. For babies and young children to flourish, we need to pay attention to how they understand and how they feel about themselves and how secure they feel in their close relationships. And in doing so, they develop their capacities to make sense of how they and other people experience the world. Children's self-image, their emotional understanding and the quality of their relationships affects their self-confidence, their potential to experience joy, to be curious, to wonder, and to face problems, and their ability to think and learn. A holistic relational approach creates an environment that enables trusting relationships so that children can do things independently with others, forming friendships. We know that early relationships strongly influence how children develop, and having close, secure attachments to their carers is important for children's healthy development. Positive relationships support well-being and their gradual development of self-regulation. This diagram shows the attachment cycle that happens during the first year of a baby's life as they are establishing who is the adult most sensitive to their needs that they should form their primary attachment with. The cycle starts when the baby has a need, whether that's hunger, thirst, discomfort, tiredness, and this usually results in the baby crying to alert the caregiver that they have a need. In the attachment cycle, the need is met by a caregiver, And as this happens countless times during the first year, if the caregiver is sensitive and consistent in meeting the child's need, trust develops and a secure attachment forms. It's worth noting here that according to Winnicott, parents just need to be good enough, and it's not necessary to immediately respond to a child every time they start to whimper. It just needs to be enough that the child comes to learn that they can have an impact on the world and that they can rely on their caregiver to meet their needs most of the time. When adults tune in to children's signals and respond sensitively and consistently to meet their needs, children feel safe, secure, relaxed, and loved. When a parent comforts their distressed infant, restoring a state of relaxation and contentment, they have acted as an external co-regulator of their baby's emotions. As the infant regularly experiences their parent as a reliable, calming influence, they will begin to regulate their own stress, knowing that help is readily available and they can trust the parent to do well by them. This is how self-regulation skills start to develop. The child's internal working model, or template, of themselves and their worthiness is constructed from the close relationships with their caregiver. The outcome of a warm, satisfying, and responsive relationship is that children are more likely to have a positive sense of self, make close and lasting relationships with others, cope with adversity and/or seek help, view themselves as lovable and valuable, be confident to explore an environment, and can return to their secure base of their caregiver when they need to. So when things go well in that relationship and they develop an attachment cycle, the infant develops an internal working model of himself as being lovable, special, competent, and able to make an impact on the world, of others as being loving, caring, responsive, and trustworthy, and of the world as a safe, exciting place to explore. However, when an infant whose primary requirements for food, water, love, comfort, and security are not met, this can lead them to become anxious that future needs will not be met and develop mistrust, acquiring insecurities and feelings of rejection. The growing infant doesn't learn to regulate their own emotions, and this can lead to an overreaction to environmental stresses. It's very important to acknowledge here that this early relationship with a caregiver can get interrupted for a variety of reasons without inferring blame or guilt. Most people care about their children and are doing the best that they can with their own circumstances and needs. Examples of factors that sometimes get in the way of the development of secure attachments can be difficulties within the adult relationships, poverty, time, bereavement, parental mental health, and parents' own experiences of parenting and their own physical health. Those children with a less positive experience of those early interactions will develop qualitatively different representations of themselves and others. So the infant develops an internal working model of themselves as unlovable and incompetent, of others as uncaring and untrustworthy, and of the world as being unsafe and full of threat. This can mean that children who did not experience sensitive, predictable, nurturing relationships in their early years spend a lot of their time in a state of fight or flight, meaning that they can be very reactive and less able to self-regulate and be in a place ready for learning. This video of the still face experiment provides an illustration of this cycle in action.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
And this brings us on to talking specifically about self-regulation, which involves children developing the ability to regulate their emotions, thoughts, and behaviour to enable them to act in a positive way towards a goal. So children are not born with self-regulation skills. They develop them as they experience warm, nurturing, and loving relationships with important adults, in combination with clear, positive, consistent behavioural boundaries. Emotional self-regulation means experiencing and also managing your feelings. If young children don't feel emotionally safe and are not helped with emotional self-regulation, they will struggle to learn. It starts with external regulation as a baby, as shown in the still face experiment, and then includes the adult modelling calming strategies and naming and talking about feelings and ways to manage as the child gets older. This helps children learn to recognise their feelings and builds their cognitive awareness of strategies to manage and reduce extreme emotions. The evidence suggests that pretend play is one of the most powerful contexts for children to develop self-regulation. In pretend play, children have to follow the rules of the play and restrain their impulses, and the development of language is also important in being able to verbally label an emotion rather than show that emotion through their behaviour. So young children need some regulation by others, or co-regulation as it's called. For example, if a child is sad, the adult is empathetic, accepting, and helps to label the emotion verbally. This is the way that adults can help children to manage their impulses, anger, or distress. The adult's role as co-regulator is critical in a child's development of self-regulation. As they observe and interact with their peers and adults, children gradually move from the experience of being supported in managing their feelings, thoughts, and behaviours to developing the ability to regulate these more independently. If we look at this illustration of the brain, in very simplistic terms, the brain develops from the bottom up. We are born with our reflexes and ability to feel emotions, but the thinking part, or the blue part of the brain that allows us to think logically and rationally and control our impulses and plan, develops over time. That's why toddlers are prone to big explosions of emotions over really small things like being given the wrong colour cup, whilst you wouldn't necessarily expect that in an older child. The reason for that is that over time we develop neural connections between our emotional brain, the green part, and our reasoning and thinking brain, the blue part. And these connections are developed through the context of nurturing relationships that act as co-regulators. And this is put nicely by Dr. Pia Rabello-Brito, a neuroscientist for UNICEF, when she says that every time a parent speaks to a young child, it sparks something in the child, it's stimulation to the child, it forms brain connections. So why is self-regulation and the development of self-regulation so important? According to the Education Endowment Foundation Early Years Toolkit, the development of self-regulation and executive functioning skills, which is that blue part of the brain and the skills that are developed in that part, is consistently linked with successful learning, including pre-reading skills, early mathematics, and problem solving. Strategies that seek to improve learning by increasing self-regulation have an average impact of 5 additional months' progress. So whilst it's vital to view children as unique with their own developmental pathway, it's also useful to use some markers of typical development to allow for the early identification of difficulties or delays so that these can be supported at the earliest opportunity. So for each one of these sections, we'll have a little look at the things that you may expect to see around the age of 5. So for the personal, social and emotional development, you might see developing self-regulation at this point, that the general behaviour is more sensible, controlled and independent, but with wide variability in different situations. Children might be able to hide and modulate emotions and express socially appropriate responses to events. They may be able to follow tidiness routines, but need constant reminders. They may be able to play imaginatively alone or with playmates. They may be able to choose their own friends and play cooperatively with peers most of the time and understand the needs for rules and fair play. They may have an increasing understanding of the feelings and wishes of other people and their friends, engaging in quite a lot of bargaining and compromising and reconciliation in a very simplistic way. So you might hear lots of, if you don't do this, I won't be your best friend anymore, is a very common thing that I'm sure you've heard lots of at this stage of development. They'll show definite sense of humour, and also they might be tender and protective towards younger children and pets and comfort playmates in distress. Moving on to our second section of communication and language, we're just going to start with a few statistics. So according to the research, 2.7 million children in the UK struggle to communicate. In some parts of the UK, up to 50% of children entering schools will have speech, language and communication needs. And speech, language and communication needs are the most common difficulty in primary school children with an education, health and care plan. So some key points about communication and language. Firstly, two-way interaction is absolutely crucial. Children need to be able to expect a response from their caregivers. Language is also our first symbol system upon which we build other symbol systems such as musical notes, maths and logic. At 3 months old, babies can discriminate between all of the sounds in all of the languages in the world. And as they grow, their brains develop, perception narrows, and they specialise in just the ones that they hear from their parents. Research shows that the higher the prevalence of motherese, which is the slow, clear, high-pitched speech that parents often do at 11 months, predicts the number of words that they'll have by the age of 2. And in homes where children are read to daily, researchers found that there is about a 32 million word gap between those children who are read to and those who aren't read to by the time they start school. So experiences in the womb lay the foundation for communication, and a baby's voice is evident right from the beginning. Babies use their bodies, facial expressions, gestures, sounds and movement to seek connections and respond to those around them. Young children depend on the back and forth interactions with responsive others to develop confidence as effective communicators and language users. Communication and language lay a foundation for learning and development, guiding and supporting children's thinking while underpinning their emerging literacy. A language-rich environment is absolutely crucial. A child's first language provides the roots to learn additional languages, and parents should be encouraged to continue to use their home languages to strengthen and support their children's language proficiency. Neuroscientific research suggests that there is a sensitive period for developing language skills between the ages of 0 and 5 years. The brain is like a sponge at this time and can distinguish between and separate different languages, hence the reason that some children are able to speak multiple languages before starting school without the explicit teaching that we would require as adults to pick up on all of the grammar and idiosyncrasies of each language. However, in order to pick up language, children need interaction. Babies and toddlers learn to speak by interacting with their parents and caregivers, picking up on sounds, words, body language and eye contact. They also need quiet time to sit and babble and experiment with their voices. Children's language is enriched and enhanced by the back and forth exchanges with practitioners who respect and respond to children's conversations. Research shows that until they're about 2.5 years old, young children do not learn effectively just from watching something on a screen. One study found that in children younger than 4, the more hours of television that they watched, the fewer words they learned. One interesting piece of research looked at the way in which 2,700 families interacted with their infants and toddlers whilst pushing them around in a pushchair. She found that caregivers were less likely to speak to infants when the child was in a forward-facing pushchair compared with pushchairs where the baby faces the caregiver in what she called a toward-facing journey. Parents talk to their children twice as much during the 15-minute toward-facing journey, and both parents and babies laughed more. When a parent can't easily see the things that attract a baby's attention, valuable opportunities for the joint attention and interaction that provide the foundations of language can be missed. The researcher noted that forward-facing pushchairs are a relatively new development. In the 19th century, pushchairs were designed so that infants faced the person pushing them. But the development of convenient collapsible pushchairs changed all that, which happened around the late 1960s because of engineering constraints that required the baby to face forwards and look out at the world. Interestingly, forward-facing collapsible pushchairs also tend to be cheaper and therefore may play a part in the gap in vocabulary for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. When looking at the bigger picture, the development of these language skills is so important because the Institute of Health Equity said strong communication and language skills in the early years are linked with success in education, higher levels of qualifications, higher wages, and better health. While not all children will follow the exact same sequence or progress at the same rate, it's important to identify children at risk of language delay or disorder, as this can have an ongoing impact on well-being and learning across the curriculum. So what you may expect at around the age of 5 is fluent speech that's grammatically conventional and mostly phonetically correct, except for some confusions of the s, f, and th group. They give full name and age. They should understand time and sequence concepts and use terms such as first, then, and last. And generally, they will love to be read stories, delight in singing rhymes, in singing and doing rhymes, and enjoy jokes and riddles. And lastly, onto physical development. So gross motor skills can be defined as those skills that involve the entire body, particularly the large muscles. So examples of this would be walking, running, jumping, catching, controlling movements of the arms and legs. As well as requiring cognitive and physical readiness, children also require lots of practice and opportunities to strengthen their muscles and improve their balance. In the book From Birth to 5 Years by Mary Sheridan, she describes the development of motor skills as a combination of biological maturation and experience. According to Thielen, the brain, body, and experiences make a continually self-organizing dynamic system resulting in the progression of skills. So on the left-hand side, you will see the biological factors of muscle strength, balance, coordination, and information processing ability. And on the right-hand side, you have what she describes as the action-perception cycle, where children perceive possibilities for action and learn from their experiences. So, for example, when a baby waves their arm in the air for the first time, this might be perceived by others as a greeting, leading to others around them to copy and model the wave for the child. When the baby repeats this action and receives a positive reaction from those around them, they are more likely to repeat it and hone their waving through watching those around them. The approximate sequence of motor development shown in this diagram encompasses changes in tone, balance, strength, and coordination, with experience playing an increasingly significant role throughout this process. Once again, this must be seen as a rough guide given the huge amount of variation in development and the different experiences of the children. For example, babies who like being on their tummies or are given lots of tummy time by their parents as babies are more likely to crawl first rather than bum shuffling, which on average would then lead to them being able to walk more quickly than children who have bum shuffled. Equally, at 4 years of age, a typical child might have the biological maturation and coordination skills to control a tricycle, but without the experience and practice, they wouldn't reach that milestone. So by the age of 5, you might expect that a child would be able to walk easily on a narrow line, can skip on alternate feet, move rhythmically to music, can stand on one foot for 8 to 10 seconds, and can throw and catch a ball well with 2 hands. In terms of fine motor skills, these are the skills that require the hands and fingers to work together to perform a task, like writing, cutting, sewing, or using cutlery. And this involves the coming together of perceptual skills, biological abilities, motor skills, and cognitive abilities such as understanding, memory, organisation, and planning. And again, children need opportunities to develop these skills through lots of practice, for example, through finger foods, finger painting, threading, pegboards, etc. These X-ray images show the role that biology plays in the development of fine motor skills, with the gaps between the bones closing over time to allow for more precise movements. And pencil control develops as a result of this biological maturation, but there are also cognitive, sensory, neurological and perceptual factors at play. For example, stable handedness appears gradually from about 2 to 4 years of age. If a child only uses one hand before the age of 18 months, that would actually be a cause for concern and may be indicative of a neurological issue. So in general, by the age of 5, what you might expect is that children can usually write their first name. However, all names are not born equal, and for some children that's going to be much more difficult than others. About 50% of 5 to 6-year-olds will write letters the wrong way round, and actually 10% will still do this kind of mirror writing when age 7. You would expect that children might be able to copy a cross and draw a square, and being able to copy a cross is an indication of writing readiness, as it requires crossing the body midline. Usually, by about the age of 5.5, children can also copy a triangle. There's also drawing a person with a head, body and limbs you'd expect at 5. And again, this is an indication of cognitive factors at play in the development of fine motor skills, because there's actually one test of cognitive development in young children, the Goodenough Harris Draw a Person test, which looks at the inclusion of certain elements within a drawing of a person as an indicator of cognitive functioning. And finally, you may expect that by this age that children can colour pictures neatly and stay within the outlines. And to finish, just to think about the importance of those early years, there are 2 quotes that I just wanted to share with you. So according to Development Matters, when we succeed in giving every child the best start in their early years, we give them what they need today. We also set them up with every chance of success tomorrow. And according to UNICEF, faster than we ever thought, the first years of a child's life set the stage for all future growth. And finally, the key points from this session are best summarised in this diagram from the EYFS statutory framework. So children are all unique and on their own unique pathways depending on their own individual factors, environmental factors and experiences. Positive relationships play a crucial role in the development right from the very beginning. Children need stimulating environments, opportunities to play and exposure to rich language, and all of these together feed in to the child's learning and development, which will develop at different rates. This means that it's crucial for us to understand where each child is on their own developmental journey and meet them at that point, helping them to master each skill to build a solid foundation. I hope this has been a helpful session and thank you for listening.